Hey yo, everyone! Gamescom 2024 is just wrapping up, and there have been a few pleasant surprises. A new Borderlands game, obviously riding off of the success of the movie, a new look at the Batman VR game, which looks surprisingly fun, a brand new Mafia game set in Sicily in the 1900s, and of course, Indiana Jones finally getting its release date. With the game slated for 2024, I was beginning to become a bit concerned that nothing official had been announced yet, considering we're almost to September. But alas, we have an official date, December 9th, 2024. But that's not all. Xbox also announced that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle would be releasing on PlayStation in the spring of 2025. So, all of this excitement is certainly going to stir up some hubbub, but I'm sure the gaming community is well equipped to have a thoughtful and respectful conversation about it. In the meantime, I want to look across the aisle and try to figure out if PlayStation would ever be willing to share their games back with Xbox. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Alright, let's get it. Alrighty, so let's start with Xbox here. Indiana Jones, an Xbox Studios game, is releasing on the PS5 next spring. Wow, we knew that Xbox said they were going to be releasing more games on PlayStation, but I thought it would be more of a staggered release, kind of like what PlayStation does for PC. They usually release the game on PlayStation exclusively, and then after a full year or so, announce its port to PC. I mean, spring of 2025 is only like a 3-month window from the Xbox release. Ever since Xbox bought Activision for $70 billion, it feels as if they've been kinda all over the place. To me, it feels like they've bit off more than they can chew, which has resulted in layoffs and some so-so games. Of course, other companies have been dealing with this also, but none of them just spent $70 billion with a B on buying one of the biggest video publishers of all time. So it appears that Xbox is trying to make up for some of this lost revenue by releasing their games everywhere. PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and if the Switch is capable, probably there as well. Honestly, this is really the best way for Xbox to make money at the moment. They just spent a boatload of cash for Activision Blizzard, and the gaming industry is also in a bit of a rough spot right now. So instead of relying on their console exclusives, they've opened it up to try and really make the most of their new studios. It's no secret that the Xbox Series is being outpaced by the PS5 by a considerable margin. So if Xbox were to keep their games exclusive, they would only really be hurting themselves. I mean, let's be honest here, I'm super excited for this Indiana Jones game, but it's not the type of game where I would go out and buy a specific console for. So releasing it on PlayStation, as weird as it's going to be to see Xbox Studios on a PS5 game, just makes sense financially. Realistically, this generation is probably going to be a loss for Xbox. It had a slow start, then went $70 billion in the hole, and is now trying to recoup some of that money with cross-platform sales. I do think that the next console, whenever or whatever that turns out to be, will hit the ground running because they will have had time to work with all of their new studios, and hopefully the global economy will be in better shape. All of that being said though, I think we're watching the next era of gaming unfold before our eyes. For Xbox, they're going to win over players through Game Pass. Instead of having these exclusive games, they'll have an exclusive subscription service, which is by far the best value in the industry. Then to really make the most of it, they'll release their games on other platforms for full price. So let's say if you're on PS5 and like what Xbox is putting out, you could buy them for your console, or you could buy an Xbox and subscribe to Game Pass and get a much better value. I mean, if you play 4 games in a year from Game Pass, then you're already getting more value than you would if you were buying the games outright. And then there's PlayStation. PlayStation is in a bit of a weird spot. They're currently outselling the Xbox Series by a whopping 26.5 million units. This data is a bit old, it's from January of 2024, but still, that's a considerable amount. On top of that, Sony's been putting out some bangers lately. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, and soon Wolverine. Now some of these games have also released on last gen, such as Ghost of Tsushima, but for the most part, these are PS5 exclusives. Despite that, Sony still isn't making the profit that they were hoping for. How do I know that, you may ask? Trust me, bro. Just kidding. I'm using my detective skills here. When has Sony ever sold their exclusives anywhere but a PlayStation console? For them to break that tradition has to mean something, right? Well, I think it does at least. Like I mentioned earlier, the gaming industry, like every other industry in the world right now, is going through a little bit of a recession. We see this reflected by game cancellations, studio closures, and of course, layoffs. Just like Xbox, Sony has been laying off employees from some of their recently purchased studios as well. For example, Bungie laying off about 20% of their workforce. Obviously, a company doesn't fire a fifth of their workers if they're hitting all of their market goals. It's pretty apparent that Sony is also being affected by the current state of the gaming industry and is also trying to find ways to increase their profits. As a result, we've seen the layoffs, but also for the first time, PlayStation games on PC. Their marquee titles like God of War, The Last of Us, and Spider-Man have all been ported over. Since August of 2020, Sony has released 14 titles on PC, resulting in an estimated $830 million in profit. This just seems like the logical way forward, right? As popular as the PS5 is, the PC audience is growing at a much faster rate than the traditional gaming consoles. The idea of having their first-party games being timed exclusives for the PS5 at first and then porting them over to PC later just makes sense. But the question still remains, will these games ever make their way over to Xbox? Phil Spencer, CEO of Xbox, has said that their cross-platform releases are a bit of an experiment to increase revenue. How much more money can they make releasing games on PlayStation and Nintendo rather than making it Xbox exclusive and hoping to bring people over? That's the question that they're asking, and it seems as if the cross-platform route is the more profitable one. Not only for the current value of Xbox, but also the future value. What happens if you start releasing games on PlayStation and people start to really like what Xbox is putting there? Would that, plus the value of Game Pass, be enough to allure people over from PlayStation? The branding value on top of actual sales numbers is just a win-win for Xbox. But again, PlayStation, will they ever release their games on Xbox? For now, I'm gonna say no. They just don't really need it. They're outselling Xbox in terms of console sales and can also make additional revenue from the PC market. Xbox needs these cross-platform sales. I don't think Sony really does, at least right now. Now, if the next Xbox comes out and is fully flexing their new studios and Game Pass value and a bunch of people move over to the ecosystem, then I think Sony will reconsider it. With how volatile the industry is right now, it only takes a few missteps for a company to reconsider their traditional sales approach. Sure, the Xbox sales are a lot smaller than the PlayStation's, but that's still a number in the tens of millions that Sony is missing out on. If Xbox starts to gain traction in the coming months and years, then yes, I believe it will only be a matter of time before we see PlayStation Studios on Xbox. Maybe even before this generation is over. Probably not a day one release for the games, but still, better late than never, right? But I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of Xbox's new approach to all of this? Do you think we'll ever see any PlayStation exclusives make their way over to Xbox? What games would you like to see ported over first? And what about Nintendo? Is there any sort of future where they would be willing to release a Mario or Zelda game on another platform that isn't Nintendo? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It means a lot. I appreciate you guys as always, and I will catch you in the next one.